And a very warm welcome to all our viewers this afternoon at the Wild Earth live at the watering hole. And this afternoon we start out with some very passive giraffe and eland. What an amazing way to start. I haven't seen eland for a little while. I'm your host, Jaapie Potgieter, and I'll be taking us through some of the exciting events happening around the watering holes this afternoon. Now, by the looks of it, this young giraffe looks like a young male. He's carefully scoping the area out and nervously making sure that it's a good time to take a sip of water. The eland look like they might have actually already drank, and I see there's quite a lot of oxpeckers. The birds sitting on the neck and the shoulder there of the giraffe as well on the elands. That is unbelievable. You can see some of the elands are trying to move the birds around, shaking their ears, scratching their neck, even using their tails to keep them off certain parts. You can hear it sounds like it's very, very busy around here. Birds jumping between all the elephants. All of these birds have quite a bit of choice this afternoon. Let's see, the giraffe looks like it was about to take a sip. Fantastic. The moment it lifts its neck, the bird's back right on it, on the spots. Greetings to you too, Harry. Thank you very much, all the way to the Netherlands. I hope you enjoy this afternoon. I think it's already been quite a good start. An interesting grouping of animals we have this afternoon to start with. The eland especially, not an antelope that you encounter too often. Quite shy around people, especially, but fascinating, very, very beautiful antelope, very, very large. Oh, and we are at Tembe. Nice warm afternoon. Some beautiful elephant bulls. This guy in the front here has got some very, very decent tusks. And there is the grey heron. Looks like he's in a similar spot to where we left it yesterday afternoon. Harriet Hodgin. Thank you so much. Hello to you too. Um, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that it's still overcast in Cape Town. You can see it looks like the rest of South Africa. In the northeastern parts look a little bit more sunny. Looks like the elephants are just a tad bit, a little bit more lazy than they were yesterday. I can see some of them have some dried mud on them, so they've certainly had a splash around today, and there's some dust applying its sun protection. It's hard to imagine that an elephant's got such a sensitive skin. It's such a thick skinned elephant or animal, but it's still quite sensitive to the sun. You can hear some black-capped bulbuls calling. I thought I heard a orange-breasted bush shrike calling just now. The bird that you mostly hear, quite difficult to spot, especially out in the open. It prefers the thick vegetation, and therefore quite a secretive little bird. But Camilla, we unfortunately had to come to Tembe from Kenya. But yeah, what an amazing way to start with some eland, zebra, and a giraffe drinking. That was quite special. But not to take away from all of these guys around this very productive watering hole here in Tembe. Mercedes, happy Sunday fun day. Let's hope it's a fun day. It looks like it's going to be a fun day. You can see these elephants, they're all standing around facing different directions. I think they are just waiting for the fun to happen. Some of them are just standing around feeding a little bit. There's one that's just started drinking. And I see the three elephants around the water's edge. The one in the middle had its trunk resting on the ground. With elephants, sometimes when they just stand around like that, we tend to wonder what they might be up to. They're usually quite active, but they have all of these receptors and very sensitive nerve endings on the trunk and the thick hairs that come out of the trunk, and those are quite sensitive to vibrations. So when the elephant rests its trunk on the ground like that, it might actually just be picking up on some vibrations from a nearby area and be able to pick up if there are other elephants, maybe a herd in the proximity of this watering hole. It looks very hot there currently, and it's interesting to see only two of these animals are utilizing the shade. Jackie, a good morning to you there in Yorkshire. Over here, it's already afternoon, a very warm afternoon in some parts of South Africa. As we can see, a warm and lazy afternoon. I guess a classical African afternoon. You can see that big elephant that's just moved in the shade from the water is covering its belly with some dust. So I'm assuming it also wet it earlier. I'm hoping that some of that dust might stick there. The younger elephant under the tree looks like it's giving itself a good scratch on the side of the head or the ear. And how fortunate are they to be able to utilize their environment like that to aid them for the scratches that they have in the difficult to reach areas. It's such a massive animal. It's got a trunk, but there are still some areas it's not always easy to reach for them. Joan, how do elephants communicate with each other? Well, there's very actually. Elephants can, first of all, they do communicate a little bit with visual cues and behavioral signs, the way they act, the way they posture themselves, like most animals, most mammals. They tend to communicate straight up, directly. Um, I mean, we saw a little bit earlier when the bigger bull was walking across, like the general size, the bobbing of the head, showing that it's moving in with intent. The other elephants, the younger ones nearby, they know that that's their cue to move off, or at least give it space to do what it needs to. But they've also got more subtle ways of communicating. And they've got excellent hearing. They can hear very, very low frequencies and vibrations. And due to that, they can pick up the communication of other elephants, herds of elephants from multiple kilometers away. And they also communicate through scent. They have an excellent sense of smell. And they often, when they are moving about like that, like we can see that big elephant standing in the shade now, he's just standing. But while he's standing there, he's also sniffing the dung of the other elephants that was dropped in the area. They often sniff the tracks of other elephants in an area. So as they move about, they've got a lot of chemical traces and cues that they leave behind. And for a bull elephant looking, for instance, for a female that might be ready to mate, they'll be able to pick that up, like the changes in the more hormones and the chemical secretions of the female elephant's body that might be left behind in the dung or old urine even. They might be able to pick that up and gives them an added clue to the bigger picture of who's moving through the area. They use infrasound as well to communicate on quite a low level of rumbling that we as humans can't necessarily pick up. But we do occasionally hear elephants contact each other over distances with this very, very low, deep rumble. You can almost feel it in the ground vibrating through you. And it's fascinating to watch. I've watched elephants in the past breaking into camps where you see one or two females moving in, and they're moving through the camp, just testing the vegetation in the area to try and see what their status is, like what the chemical defenses is. Often vegetation that's in a camp hidden from elephants. They're not necessarily as high in tannins, or they don't have the strong chemical defense that plants outside that get browsed regularly have. So elephants often come into camp, and they, when for some reason the electric fence or something might be down, and they'll come and test it. And it's almost like they're sending scouts. And then while they're doing that, I've heard those elephants communicating to the rest of the herd that might be outside of the fenced in area of the camp. And you just hear this rumbles going back and forth. And sometimes you see elephants standing in one spot, a herd around the watering hole, and the next thing they all lift their heads and they move away. And it might be from elephants approaching that we can't hear in the distance. Spasi Yankov, good to hear from you again. Yeah, these elephants, they utilize their environment very, very effectively. I mean, we can see them utilizing the soft soil. And what's interesting is the soil here, it's quite high in organic matter, so it keeps moisture quite well. And it's got proper clay content in it. And due to that, it covers their bodies quite well, especially if it's wet. It sticks very, very fine, fine, salty soil. I can see what looks like a woolly necked stork there in the background. And it sounds very, very busy with the birds all around. Most easily distinguishable amongst all of these birds being the black-capped bulbul, a bird that often reminds me of northern KwaZulu-Natal. Numerous of them there. There we go. You can see two woolly-necked storks there. They often are in pairs. The one on the right hand side was sitting on the branch. You can see he was moving away as the other one approached, knowing very well that the space there is limited. And being such a large bird, they have to balance themselves with their wings to make sure they don't fall off when the other one lands. What an odd bird. It's a very beautiful bird, actually, if one gets close enough to them. It can be quite fascinating. I can see this bird's drooping its wings a little bit. So maybe it's sitting up high to dry it out. Might have picked up some moisture from wading through the water, but also if it's nice and hot like this, you'll find sometimes these larger birds will sit with their wings out and a little bit open. Also to burn off some parasites, but not just that, it also helps them cooling down a bit. Whatever little breeze comes through moves in between the wings and the body, and that helps them cooling down a little bit. Joan, what's the biggest flying bird? That's a good question. I used to think that these questions have quite straightforward answers, but they don't actually. And I know sometimes like it's very difficult to just give a straight answer. I'd say like one has to look at it in a little bit of certain categories. I know one of the heaviest birds and also a very large bird in South Africa, um, known as the Kori bustard. A male bird can weigh as much as 17 kilograms. So certainly one of the heaviest flying birds. But I know that there's some very, very big birds with very, very big and large wingspans, like the marabou stork, the saddle-billed stork. So yeah, there's some good contenders. I know in the Americas you also have the condors, which is massive, massive flying vulturine like birds. But yeah, indeed, there's a few contenders. Um, yeah, I'd say the heaviest bird, meaning weight. I think that would be probably the most impressive to get that all that weight off the ground. They often have quite the run up, so they might not always be the quickest bird, and therefore they do get taken by predators. Fast moving predators like the leopard. Always an opportunist. I've watched some amazing videos of leopards taking big birds of prey as they take off out of the sky. Quite impressive stuff. Greg, why do elephants have toenails? Well, there's a number of reasons. It is to protect them. They do actually have toes. They do actually have toes within, oh, that bony toes that come down much like our fingers. They almost look like they're walking on their toes. We had to take an X-ray of their foot, and then they have this layer of fat and cartilage that kind of acts like a absorption pillow that sits underneath the heel area. But their toenails do serve a function. They actually one of the few areas where they do respirate from. Um, unlike humans, they don't respirate the same way we do, which is why we see them swimming and wallowing and using the environment so much to cool themselves down. They've got other ways of regulating their body temperature, but they can actually sweat from their toenails. But other than that, I think it's probably more a remnant of a time when they had more movable digits in their limbs. And in those cases, the claws or the toenails would have certainly served some sort of a purpose. So you can see some, looks like a nyala in the background, as well as some warthog. You can see the one warthog's got very clear white whiskers. And then there's an interesting bird in front of one of the warthogs, which from here is a little bit difficult to identify. You can see what looks like an African jacana moving about there as well, where the Inyala was. These elephants are. The elephant's completely submerging himself. It must be quite a deep pool. It's amazing how the color of these animals change the moment they wet themselves. They become this very, very dark creature. The tusks are cleaned. If I have a look at the reeds, it looks like they've been fed on. It looks like they're stripped. They're almost like leveled in a sense. A good source of fiber for these elephants, I'm sure. Now there's some more elephants coming down. Cat fan, these elephants certainly having the time of their life. You can see they're not even paying attention to these ones that's just arrived. But it looks like it's a hot day there, so and I can see all of these elephants have at least they have some wet patches on them, so they definitely utilizing the available moisture, that's for sure. On a hot day, an elephant's water requirements can up quite a bit. We do see them tending to use more water, not necessarily for drinking. They, with their water requirements, it's also just to wash themselves, cool themselves down, swimming, like we're seeing those two. The added coolness to the skin that water is also giving those two a little bit more energy. You can see the ones enjoying it so much, it's like kind of half-heartedly just laying in the water and doesn't even want to stand up. Rosemary, that's a very good question. I've not seen a herd of elephants. Well, when I went to Tembe 2 years ago, and I was physically there in the landscape, I saw herds of elephants. But around the watering hole here, I've mainly seen males. I thought I saw one female day before yesterday, but it's mainly been these young bulls. And I think it might have to do with the season currently. From what I understand, there are a number of elephants in Tembe, but the herds might be utilizing a different area due to available resources in the current season. And females with young, they often have different dietary requirements than some of these younger bulls. And a younger bull, they might, if they have water, they have their social group, they might tend to stay in an area for a number of days and utilize it for what it is, um, which might be the reason why we're seeing these bulls moving in and out of this area where this watering hole is. At least that would be my guess. I'm sure the herds do come through, but I would say with this amount of young bulls and their rowdy nature, the herds with the female and young know that these guys are around, they might decide to go look for some other water sources. Encountering these young bulls can be quite stressful to a cow with a young calf. Especially watching those two play in the water, they look like they quite keen to push each other around. And often, when younger elephants make their way into an area, they might definitely try and test their strength against them. Now, one thing I've noticed about these elephants is their tattered ears. They've got quite tattered ears, and most of these bulls that we've seen here, which is quite an interesting comparison. And I think when we do head to one of the watering holes in the low veld, for instance, we'll have a look out at the elephant's ears there, but I'm pretty sure they're not all that tattered. And I think this might have to do a little bit with the vegetation in this area as well. Lots of thorn trees around here in northern Zululand or Maputo land. It's quite a thorny, vegetated area. The soils certainly allow for the former acacia family of trees to grow here. A family of trees that uses physical defense more so than chemical defense. Something that not always doesn't the physical defense of the trees doesn't seem to deter the elephants too much. There was an elephant earlier playing with a dead branch, what looked like a thrush, but I always find it amazing to see how these elephants just take the roughest of thorn branches and just stick that straight into their mouth. Even though they look like they're carefully chewing it and moving it around, I'm sure they're able to feel it, but it's amazing to watch. And then also scratching themselves against these thorn trees. And now we have a nice big elephant coming through. Nina Brown. Elephant herds, the breeding herds, they do have a little bit different defense mechanisms to the bachelor herds. And I'd say mechanism referring to the use of the social structure in this case. The herds have got quite a few animals. They've got vulnerable animals, the little ones, the young ones. And they're often not always most capable at defending themselves on the threat. If it comes down to a guinea fowl, for sure, a young elephant bull can certainly, or a young elephant cow can certainly chase some guinea fowl around. When it comes to larger threats, they're still vulnerable at that age, and they'll need the protection of the larger females. And boy, can females be protective over the young. I've noticed and I've watched where elephant herds come across even the scent of predators or the presence of a untrusted source, then they often form like a protective barrier. They keep all the little ones in the middle, females out on the side. If ever a little one got separated, even by a few meters from the mother or any nearby female, they'll come rushing over to their aid immediately, and they'll certainly put themselves between the little ones and whatever potential threat there might be. So I'd say the social structure with the females is quite a important defense mechanism, and then of course the severe aggression that they'll show towards a potential predator of a young one. Where the bulls, in this case, you can see this bull with the straighter tusks has moved off. The one that's come in definitely looks larger, so it's a clear indication of the size does matter. And the elephant bulls generally, their bulk, their simple enormity is used as a weapon or a protective measure. And other animals know this. Elephant bulls know this. Smaller elephant bull will very, very rarely actually directly take on a larger bull. I mean, you can never say never out here, that's for sure. You can always try with some things, with some stuff. It's impossible to know everything. It's always down to the circumstances, the individual animals. But yeah, I guess it's interesting. One common thing between a bachelor herd of elephants and a breeding herd of elephants is that the numbers of the animals to the social structure is in a big way also there for added protection, and they definitely benefit from that. Like these elephants, even though these bulls, some of them might be unrelated, they do still move together, they learn from each other, and yeah. And they do have other perceived threats. So it's always better to move in a group. As they get to know each other over a time or a period, they'll obviously find themselves being more comfortable in each other's presence and also accept each other. There's a lot of elephants here. It's funny to watch the two younger ones are. Well, it seems like it's always the younger ones that's going at each other. The ones that's not had enough time to actually figure out who's the stronger or who's the bigger one. They still kind of getting to terms with their strength and their capabilities. Here we go. That looks like a jacana there. I can't see if this is a. It looks almost like a lesser jacana. Which is quite a special little bird to see. You can just see it's wading through the mossy sections right on. Oof, look at that reflection of that big elephant walking past. That's quite a contrast. And that little dust wallow there in the back looks like it's becoming quite popular, and I am sure that's the reason why some of these elephants have moved off. What I find interesting here is the younger ones are still they know their place. They know that they're not going to mess with the older ones. So it's almost like they tolerate it a little bit more. Where some of these larger elephants, there's a very clear hierarchy going on. And that's why we see some of them moving around as the bigger ones move towards certain spots. Some of the others might just move out of the way. Maybe that's to avoid a confrontation, or just showing the necessary respect. Look at this. We can see some posturing here. The ears are held out. That was a nice little interaction there. We can see even the larger guys, they do have their rivals, so to speak. Those elephants that they eye, that they're not too sure about. And sometimes we see a little bit of posturing and pushing about, and that's just to settle the disputes or establishing their boundaries. Now, these altercations can turn quite fierce and competitive physically, but they're often just a little push here and there, and they'll rather avoid a fight. So, just to get back to that jacana from earlier, I couldn't see the colors too clearly, but I'm pretty sure it was a African jacana, not a lesser jacana. Maybe it was just a younger one. Um, the colors are quite similar. Yeah, there we go. Well, that looks like an African jacana. See, it's very, very active there. Lots of little creatures in and amongst that muddy patch of grass. It's almost like a marshy section right on the edge of this watering hole. And this is quite an interesting thing. It's not something that you often think about, but there's like a lot of little subtle little habitat changes on the edge of the water. Especially for the smaller creatures like the insects. This provides quite unique habitats. Birds especially water birds, they tend to utilize this very, very well. And you can see those very, very large toes helping this bird navigate through the marshier, wetter patches. Very, very excellent development for a creature utilizing wet patches like this. These are very, very interesting birds indeed. They are a little bit different from most other birds, where the roles of the male and the female is swapped around, so to say, or reversed. And the females are slightly larger. They're the ones that actually call to attract the mates. And once they've laid the eggs, you have the female leave the male, and the male needs to do the incubation and rearing the young. And there we can carefully see those very, very long toes. of this bird. And clearly there's a lot of food. Every time its head pops up and down, it's to grab something. Well, what a good show by this jacana. I think while we leave him to continue his feeding here, I think we'll head over to Tau and see what the Afrikaans got us there. And just look at this. More elephants. We've also got what looks like a spur-winged goose. And if I'm not mistaken, I see a female African shell duck. Might be a white-faced duck. But what a sight. It's funny to see the contrast in these elephants' behavior compared to the ones we saw at Timby just now. It looks like these ones are a little bit more cautious. Of course, we can, by the looks of that, little ones there at the back is definitely one or two females here. Therefore, a small little group or small herd. But just to note, I'm looking at the edges of these elephants' ears, and they do look much less tattered than those at Tembe. Well, that little one, being very young, wouldn't show so much signs of wear and tear yet, but it looks like even these older ones. And I think, judging from the way this differs to that, and this being an area that looks a little bit more arid and less dense than the thick forest at Tembe, I'd say it's safe to say that the environment certainly has or plays a part in that wear and tear. Good ways to identify individual elephants. Elephants can be quite tricky to identify individually, especially in herds. It's almost like here, and they tend to pay much less attention to each other. And they probably a little bit more stressed for water, and once they're down at the watering hole, it's also a larger patch for sure, with more points that they can actually access the water. So spread out a little to avoid that direct contact. Nicholas Froelich. Your 5-year-old daughter, Mia, you're asking why elephants have got such thin ears and how do they become so big? That's a very, very good question. I think the ears, so those large ears, not necessarily there to aid them in their hearing. Um, we compare the African elephant, we can see these elephants. There's a nice big bull elephant on the far end there, and then the female with the younger ones. The ears are very large of the African elephants, quite flat, thin, and one of the theories for that is that they actually, because of the fact that the African elephant or the savanna elephant spends so much time out in the open with the sun heating them up and coming down to them. So the ears actually serve a little bit of a dual function. It certainly helps them in cooling down. The larger the ears, the more blood flows through it, and also gives them almost like fans, like wind fans, makes it able for them to fan themselves if it's wet. And they constantly flap the ears, fanning themselves. And whatever blood moves through the ears, it will cool down, and as it moves through the body, it will just drop the inner body temperature slightly. So the ears is more there for a body regulating function, and hence the African elephant has got the larger ears, and it's thin enough for it to be able to cool down and the blood to be cooled as it flaps. We will notice with the Asian elephants the ears are slightly smaller. They tend to move more in forested areas with a little bit more shade. At least that would be one of the theories. The other reason why elephants are so large, well, they eat a lot, essentially. They're very, very large mammals. That was probably due to their ancestral evolution, and maybe it was to compete with other animals. Maybe it was because of the reason that they had more food and oxygen available. I think there's quite a lot of theories as to why exactly they have evolved to become as big as they have, but they certainly need to eat a lot, almost constantly. There's a very nice male kudu walking off there. Quite a rare antelope to actually see come down to drink out in the open. Very rarely that we do see them. Beautiful male kudu. Females don't have horns, so with the males we can easily tell when it's them. Sandra McIsaac. So all the way from the east coast of Canada. I'm very happy to hear that you are watching the sunrise safari on your TV and the watering hole on your tablet. That's multitasking indeed. That's very, very impressive. Making sure you're not missing out on the action. And good to know. Very good to know. And it's there's a lot happening in the middle of the day when it's hot. You can't miss out. There's a few more elephants that's gathered here now. Looks like there might actually be one or two females now with their offspring. The bull is still hanging around. I saw earlier there was a brief moment of what looked like a brief moment of confusion when the elephant cow was moving on, and then her little one latched onto one of the younger bulls that moved past, which occasionally happens. So we can see these elephants are quite relaxed. It's more like a meet and greet session, kind of checking each other out. They know that this is maybe the only big source of water in a wide area, so they kind of respect the fact that the others need to come down. So it's just like a little moment of checking each other out. Tom Tom needed. Which elephants have the best temperaments between the African and the Asian? That is a good question. I think historically, I'd personally say probably the Asian elephant, but I think it's very difficult to narrow it down to the whole species as such. I'll rather say that it depends on the circumstances, the area, and the conditions in that particular area. I think the Asian elephants have certainly been prosecuted over history to a point where there's much less left. And with this, it's interesting to note that there is a domesticated subspecies of Asian elephants, which is not necessarily the same species. Although they were kind of domesticated from those, they're not the same or the exact animals that were the original wild free living elephants. And over very, very long periods of time, elephants being domesticated, they have used those domesticated genes and they've bred elephants from that. And those, they used to being utilized as kind of as a pack animal by people. So in that regard, they've got a much easier temperament. They tend to work easier and they've been utilized more in the eastern parts of the world. But having said that, the African elephant just wasn't really. The African elephant's definitely larger, so it would have taken a little bit more effort to domesticate them. But it's not that they haven't ever been domesticated at all. There are some records of elephants in the Congo back in the day being domesticated, although those might have been the forest elephants found in those regions. Um, but I'd say it's generally regarded that the African elephant has a less favorable temperament compared to the Asian elephant. But yeah, in Africa nowadays, African elephant's not utilized like the Asian elephant. It was never really as a pack animal. I think whatever historic records of people in the Congo utilizing them, that was more for the purposes of conflict and in war. Um, I think they definitely utilize them in some aspects to try and just cover distances and help with certain tasks. I mean, it's a very large animal, could carry a lot of weight, but yeah, it's not been utilized to the same extent that the Asian elephant has been. Yo, look at this elephant. He's covering every inch of his body. Every inch. Behind the ears, under the belly. I always find it fascinating to watch how they cover themselves with mud. It's interesting. They actually use that tip of the trunk, kind of like fingers, almost like digits. Or they pick up this clump of muds. Of course, like the wet mud and the water on the trunk also spreads, but it's like they pick up these little clumps and they throw it like a targeted throw to certain parts of the body. He's getting pushed out of the way. Look at the little ones drinking. You can see it's quite muddied up where he's been taking a mud bath, so they not really drinking. But from to link back to Mia's question earlier about why elephants have such thin ears, like we can see here, this is quite interesting. These elephants just come in, they're wetting the areas behind the ears first. And that's because that's the areas where the thin skin there will be able to cool down quicker and more directly, and therefore the blood within the ears will be able to cool down quicker, and that will immediately help the elephant drop its body temperature by a degree or so. Now you can see this young bull elephant is being a little bit irritating. The cow with the young one has just moved straight past. Anna May, how do the elephants filter the mud before they drink? So they don't fully filter it. They go and they look for the cleaner parts of the water. But what they sometimes do is when they slurp up the water, they actually um, like squirt out a little bit of it first before they squirt the rest of the water over the body or before they drink it. And they look actively for the patches of water where it's not as muddied. I mean, to a certain degree, they take up a lot of mud in the water that they drink, but they manage to handle that quite well. So when they take a slurp of that water, you'll sometimes see they often start like the first one or two slurps, they just squirt like a little bit of water out first, and then the rest they'll put into their mouth or directly into their throat. And let's see, this elephant's already got quite a lot of mud on him, so maybe he might be coming down to drink water on this side, which would be exactly what we were talking or discussing now. Oh no, he's looking for more mud. Well, how much mud can an elephant cover himself in? Well, I guess when it's there on a hot day and it's worth it. Look at that. Now he's holding his trunk up, so he's just testing the water here. I'm pretty sure he is. No, not testing the water. I mean testing the air. I'm pretty sure he's sniffing the air, and that's quite interesting to note. There, he's actually cleaned the tip of his trunk in that water before he drank it. Now have a look. And he's drinking this one clearly. I'm sure it's also muddy, but not as muddy as where he was. To get all the excess mud off and then slurp up some water and drink it. So he does take care to drink, I guess, the cleanest water it can find. Jungle Jim. What an amazing name. During a drought, I'd say the most important things to elephant between cooling down or having water to drink would be having water to drink. Cooling down is important, but there are other ways. I mean, in this case, this drastically cools the animal, and it's a very, very effective cooling way to cover itself in mud completely. But if it had to choose between drinking and using whatever water is there to cool itself down, it'll certainly choose drinking. It's got a high water requirement. A big elephant bull can take more than 200 liters of water a day, but there's other cool down, standing in the shade, moving as little as possible. Um, yeah, so I'd say the drinking of water is more important than cooling down. That's for sure. You can see all of these elephants are covered in mud. Now there's an interesting duck I've noticed around this watering hole, the African shell duck. A beautiful, beautiful bird. I'll have a look out if I see it again. You can see the blacksmith lapwing walking around there. But not a common duck to see. It's a bird that prefers the more arid areas, and large watering holes like this would be a good spot for it. Ah, there we go. Oh, that's a blacksmith lapwing. And another blacksmith lapwing. Common visitor around watering holes throughout South Africa. Then we have a common moorhen. Shy birds. I mean, if they won't move too far from the water, but in this case, these little islands of mud with the greenery on provide so much food that it's perfect conditions for them just to move about. You can see that bull is constantly moving, feeding on whatever it can grab there. Doesn't look like there's anything major hiding in the shade over here. But I just want to remind our viewers that tonight, the 25th of August, there will be a fireside chat about the threatened species. And some of the species that will be discussed is lions, elephants, wild dogs, and topics will include the challenges they face on a daily basis regarding their conservation as well as ongoing efforts. It'll be at 7 o'clock Central African time, and it's for explorers and members only. And then also the Kids Drive registrations. Kids Drive will be back from the 21st of August, running Wednesday to Friday, and it will be from 3:30 Central African time to 4:30 Central African time. And if you're a teacher or a parent and you want to book a slot, please head over to our website. You can see all those, looks like those white skid marks right on the edge of the water, showing us all the amount of animals, hooved animals, elephants, lots and lots of animals that's come down to come and drink. A very, very popular spot, this. Now, as the animals come down to drink, they move on the edge of the water, they step it down. As they slide into the water, they kind of extend over time, they extend the surface area of this watering hole, but it also adds to the mud content. And when it becomes very, very dry, then that will be quite a muddy pool. Well, we've had some amazing elephant interaction here. I think let's head over back to Oldonyo to see what's happening in that watering hole. Oh, elephant and eland. What a sight. You can actually hear that elephant squirting that water deep down into its throat. You can hear it's got kind of like an echo from the noise moving through the tubes in the trunk and down into the throat. And another giraffe. A thirsty giraffe. Look at the tongue coming out. It's very eager to get a drink. Quite a few giraffes moving in. Maybe these giraffes seem a little bit less nervous than the one. There was one earlier as we started the afternoon. It was a young one. Maybe it was still traveling with a herd or a group that was not moving off, so maybe that was why it was a little bit more nervous. And these ones certainly look slightly more relaxed. The elephant doesn't seem too bothered by them. Oh, what a spectacular view. Nice and low down. It's interesting to compare the elephant and the giraffe at this angle. Two of the, well, the largest and then the tallest creature. Big elephant bull like this one can be about just over 3 meters at the shoulder. And then a very, very big giraffe, male giraffe, can reach about 5 meters in height. So this is quite interesting to see. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate your comment about scientific knowledge. I mean, we do have to have some level of scientific knowledge when it comes to these animals. I guess the scientific approach is the way that we understand, at least understand their biology and the differences between that and our own. And I think that's often why, or big reason why we find these animals so fascinating. But I try not to be overly scientific. There are some things that's certainly very valid and interesting to delve into, but I think sometimes some of the technical terms can get lost in conversation. There comes another elephant. That should be interesting. Interesting. The elephant's moving just a little bit off to the side. Looks like the one that's just come in looks slightly taller at the shoulder. Very similar though. Once again, we can clearly hear that amazing sound of the elephant squirting the water down its throat. Just a testament to its enormity. Well, while these two elephants are enjoying their drink, let's head over to Juma. Let's see what's happening there this afternoon at that watering hole. And here we've got some properly mud pasted elephants. Amazing, there we go. I was wondering, let's see, that elephant at the back looks like he might scratch himself up against the one in front. There we go. I mentioned earlier that they're quite resourceful, utilizing the environment. In this case, there's no tree provided, so might as well use his buddy. You can see over here, this water's not that deep, so but they're still using this mud to try and cover as much as possible of their body. You can see they're rolling back and forth. Making sure that they cover the whole side, the ears. The lapwings certainly sound upset. Looks like there's some starlings coming down as well. I can imagine all these elephants going about in the mud like that. There's probably a lot of insects and things that got disturbed. So those starlings are definitely utilizing the opportunity. Now it looks like they're having a game of your feet's in my space. I'm thinking this elephant's trying to get up and he's struggling a bit. See, both of them's got their trunk tips curled around. So by the looks of it, if I look in the grass in the foreground, I can see it looks like the wind's coming from there, right? So they might be picking up on the scent of something approaching. Just took a moment to carefully examine it. And now I'm sure they're going to try and remove some of that excess mud. No one's still using his friend to scratch his hard to reach area. Difficult to, I think it would very much depend on the animal itself. There'll be environment for sure. It depends on where the animal comes from originally, where the animal will have to get integrated. I know that they are that, elephants have been rewilded, young elephants, but that is often where they initially come from, a wild area. An elephant coming from growing up in captivity, I definitely, I'd say it'll probably can give it a good shot, and they'll be able to surprise us for sure. But there's a lot of knowledge that will have to be gained, and if a elephant cow finds a herd that's willing to accept her, then I'm pretty sure chances are good that she could be rewilded and integrated. She'll, who knows, maybe she might even, after a while, start moving on her. Might be in a situation or in a similar situation that they're not directly related to the herd that they find themselves in. But usually, elephant herd is formed out of related females and their offspring. Once those herds get too big, then we get them off and they form their own smaller groups. And they'll move in similar areas. Behavior learned from a young age. The mother passes her knowledge on to her offspring, especially her female. She has a male offspring. That male offspring might move off, and once it gets old enough, and they'll have a chance further from other older males, and that's why we often find the groups of elephants, the younger males in the bachelor herds following, and much older males learning the ropes from that animal. But it's amazing the knowledge that gets passed down. Sometimes knowledge gets passed down, and it's been proven that knowledge gets passed down from one generation of elephants to the next, where it might be some like a migratory route in terms of during times of severe drought or severe stress, where they have to move into areas they have never moved into before, and they still have a general idea of where they're going. We can see now here where the elephants were in the mud. There's been quite a disturbance. This is a perfect example of what a living elephant. Obviously, because of all of that, there could have been a whole bunch of things that came off that elephant. Ectoparasites, skin parasites, um, insects they brought in from the nearby bush when they walked over, the fresh water, the smell of the animal, insects, flies, and things like that that might get trapped in the wet mud. Now these birds are capitalizing on that. It's interesting to see though that the starlings away to the wet mud. The blacksmith lapwings much better adapted for the wetter conditions around the watering hole's edge. Well, I think we might get back here later, but for now, while the birds are utilizing the elephant's wallowing space, I think we're going to head over to Founder's Lodge, where we've got a view of a blessed bog. Just look at that. What a beautiful antelope. And what a beautiful brief view indeed. It's an amazing creature that you don't get to see too many areas. They are endemic to South Africa. Nowadays, they're all over the world, or all over Southern Africa, and suitable habitat. Or for various reasons, game breeding and for game viewing. But it is an animal that's originally an endemic Africa, meaning that it's only found in South Africa. And what I find quite in that one we saw now is it had the white markings on its face, ran in one, which is actually a distinguishing feature of a subspecies of the blessbok called a bontebok. They're endemic. Some regarded to be two separate species. But in this particular case, when it turned around and we could see the rump, it clearly showed us that it was a blessbok. Which are very, very unique animals of the plains, and as we can see there, the hilly background, that's what they prefer spot. They lie side, they blend in perfectly with their markings. Looks like quite a beautiful day. Yeah, it is, but beautiful. Is a little bit windy. I think let's head back over to Tao. And Bless Box seems to that's for now. It was a beautiful view though. And here we back with an elephant with a hat. I don't think that was intentionally done. Trying to grab some mud and then got the plant material on its head, but it would certainly serve the purpose of cooling him down a little longer. And see, it looks like he's feeding on this green grass growing on these muddy islands. There's another elephant bull coming in. But look at that deep, deep mud that this elephant's in. Like he's really putting in the effort to try and get that grass out. I'm assuming that it's quite a must be in there. So there's just two things that I would like to remind our viewers about is wildlife photography with Danielle Carstens at Mashatu Game Reserve in Botswana. That'll be next year in September. That'll be a fall. And it'll focus on using the underground photo hide at the new Lala Limpopo sleepout. The hide is on the dam, and this dam was previously known as Pond. It will be very appealing for most of our Wild Earth viewers, and it's got beautiful accommodation at Mashatu Lodge. Professional photographer Danielle Carstens will be guiding the experience throughout and wants to use an exclusive special photographic vehicle. And on the ground training while out on safari will be given, and obviously give photographers the chance to take incredible photographs. Another experience would be to join Steve Falconbridge in the Sabi Sands in South Africa. That's next year in February. It is for 6. And if you book this trip, then you'll automatically get a free ticket to Dream. You'll get the chance to travel in the Wild Earth broadcast during a live show. What an amazing experience to get to see how they operate behind the scenes and also to get to meet some of the famous animals. The JC Safari House is just around the corner from Juma, and it's a Fuse house, and that's where you'll be staying. It's very, very luxurious, and yeah, hopefully the animals, some of the well-known leopards might make their way past during that time. Dark that elephant with his vegetate with his green crown. I'd rather call it a green crown. It looks almost like a flower crown. Is indeed quite a. It even looks like the elephant behind him is checking us out and not sure what to make of it. And indeed, Sunday is Elephant Spa Day. It's been quite a warm day all over. It seems like the whole northern and east of is very, very warm. So, Elephant Spa Day, nothing better to keep them cool. Ari, it's definitely been a pool mud party. Party today, it seems like. I'm not sure what looks like an interesting bird there. Oh, it's an Egyptian goose, just to the left of the elephant with its green crown. I think he's crowned himself the king of this pond. That's amazing. His plus to be relatively short, quite luscious, of course, lots of moisture. It's plucking it out from that mud heap in the middle of the pool. And what I find quite their teeth is extremely important to their survival, merely for the fact that they spend most of their day feeding, at least elephants in the wild does. And with all that mud in between, it would pick up quite a lot of material that would certainly grind its teeth down. See, just before it puts it in its mouth, it just repositions it a little bit. Yeah, the elephant still doesn't know. Still seems a little bit unsure what to make of it. But I think he's looking for that deep patch where himself. Oh, he's also come over to the green grass. In this case, I guess the grass on the other side. Ooh, maybe I've not looked carefully enough, but I haven't noticed a crocodile out on the bank before. I mean, I did briefly cross my mind where he was when I saw this elephant in the water, but I guess it would be way better to be out on the bank there rather than to try and maneuver in between these two big elephants. By the looks of it, they're gonna be spending quite a bit of time here. Can't imagine that there's too much green grass out in the rest of the reserve currently. It's a dry time of the season. Matikwe being right on the verge of the Kalahari. I don't think there'll be too much greenery around there. But it must be a nice little treat. Yeah, I can see. It's interesting to watch. I always the unique characteristics of each of the animals, and always think about the stories behind those characteristics. Like in this case, these two elephants, the one that joined later, the one on the right has got, seems like only one tusk and one that seems to have broken off. The crocodile is moving away. Interesting. I wonder what he's going to do, if he's going to move back. He's spotted that elephant approaching from the right and maybe just wanting to move out of the way. He obviously won't come back into the water where these two are. So let's see what he does. No, maybe he's just moved out of the way. But with its eyes situated right on top of the head, they have excellent vision. But with their eyes situated right on top of the head like that, which enables them to keep a low profile in the water while still having a lookout, but it also gives them quite a wide field of vision. And with this wide field, things approaching from far, far away, danger from the back. I think in this case, it's not so much that the crocodiles really scared rather than just want to avoid whatever confrontation it can. In the heat of the day like this, crocs are a little bit prone to over exhaustion quite easily, reptiles in general, but the heat obviously helping them to their body, also helping them with their metabolism, giving them a bit of energy. Is built for endurance. Short, massive bursts of energy. You can see it's very hot, this croc, and that little bit of movement it did now, I'm pretty sure it heated them up quite a bit. You can see it's just open. Usually when the crocodile starts to open its mouth, that's to try and help regulate the temperature, so to bring the temperature down slightly. These two elephants are still going at it. It must be quite laborsome to move in mud like that. Can't imagine it being easy. But then again, this brings such a relief, and the reward is worth it, so I don't think they mind at this point. It's a beautiful view of the trunk. You can see all those folds in there, massive amount of muscles in that trunk. When I think about it, so I've heard from a vet once, told me that the muscles is about 15 to 18,000. Some readings I've read reckons it to about 60,000 muscles in the trunk. And a big elephant bull can pick up 200 kilograms with its trunk. Generally, the ratio is about 4.5% of its body weight an elephant can pick up with its trunk. Regarded as a tool, very valuable. It's not an easy thing. It's not necessarily something that they're born with. be able to use. They need to learn it. You can often tell of an elephant roughly from how capable it is with its trunk. Takes a little bit longer than a year to properly learn. Often elephants will just drink with their mouth straight from the water, but what an incredible appendage. If you compare it, I think the human body, if I'm not mistaken, has only got around about 340 in it. There's a hammerkop moving in between them. I'm sure where these elephants have, you can see now where they fed with their trunk over, looks like a little bit paler than the other green grass around it. So now there's a lot of exposed little bits with lots of little insects and things moving around. So that any other birds are starting to move in and utilizing that. There might be some frogs hiding away under that grass went trying to go after. Nina, it's only my pleasure if you are enjoying the relaxed afternoon. I agree. I think it is quite a nice and relaxed afternoon. You can see from all the animals, the heat can be exhaustive, so they're just taking it easy, not overexerting themselves. Now, what an amazing scene! It will be interesting to see of this grass will be left by the end of this season. This watering hole also of action almost always, and it's been extremely productive and only a treat. This whole afternoon, starting out with an elephant, giraffe, and eland. Very fortunate to see some eland. It was always good to catch up with the elephant, the rowdy bunch indeed. And then to see a glimpse of the Blesbok was amazing. But I'd like to thank all our viewers for joining us this afternoon. We had a fantastic afternoon, and we definitely hope that you will join us again tomorrow. See what further stories unfold around these watering holes.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. My name is Liam Burrow, and this is On Safari.